Patton Aldridge, Serafina Aldridge, Orion Aldridge, Leora Aldridge, and Zephyr Aldridge, 5 names that once belonged to a family of wealth, power, and influence. Now they were nothing more than a list of victims in one of the most chilling murder cases the city had ever seen. Their deaths were not the result of a home invasion gone wrong or a random act of violence. They had been targeted, poisoned in their own home, during a grand New Year's Eve celebration, their lives ending in the very moment they had gathered to welcome a fresh start. But as investigators peeled back the layers of their seemingly perfect existence, it became clear that this massacre was not just about revenge, it was about justice, executed by a man who had spent years waiting for the right moment to strike. The Aldridge family was known for their extravagant New Year's Eve celebrations, a tradition they upheld every year without fail. Their luxurious home stood at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, a grand estate decorated with dazzling lights and elegant ornaments. This year's party was no different. Guests poured in from all over, filling the house with laughter, music, and anticipation for the countdown to midnight. Patton Aldridge, a wealthy entrepreneur, had spared no expense in making the night unforgettable. His wife, Serafina, moved gracefully through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries and ensuring everyone had a drink in hand. Their 3 children, Orion, Leora, and Zephyr, mingled among the guests, enjoying the attention that came with being part of such a well-known family. The atmosphere was electric, a perfect blend of joy and celebration as the final hours of the year slipped away. Outside, fireworks painted the sky with bursts of color, while the catering staff circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The scent of fine cuisine filled the air, mingling with the crisp winter breeze that slipped in through the open balcony doors. Every corner of the house was alive with movement, from the ballroom where guests danced to the quieter lounge areas, where others engaged in deep conversation. As the clock neared midnight, excitement built to a fever pitch. The grand living room, where the countdown would take place, was packed with people eager to welcome the new year together. A massive digital clock displayed the remaining minutes, its glowing numbers casting a soft light across the crowd. The Aldridge family stood near the center, smiling and raising their glasses in preparation for the toast. Then, the lights flickered. A moment of silence passed, the shift in brightness so brief that most guests dismissed it as a minor electrical glitch. The countdown continued. 10, 9, 8. The anticipation grew, voices blending into a singular roar of excitement. 7, 6, 5. A shadow moved through the edges of the crowd, unnoticed in the chaos. 4, 3. The air felt different, heavier, as if something unseen loomed over the celebration. 2, 1. The room erupted in cheers. Glasses clinked, confetti rained from the ceiling, and music blasted from the speakers. Hugs were exchanged, laughter rang through the air, and fireworks exploded outside in a dazzling display. But then a piercing scream shattered the moment. The joyous sounds were replaced by gasps and frantic movement. A woman stumbled backward, her face drained of color as she pointed toward the center of the room. Patton Aldridge had collapsed, his glass slipping from his fingers and shattering on the marble floor. He was motionless, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Serafina dropped beside him, shaking him, but he did not respond. Before anyone could process what had happened, another scream rang out from the far side of the room. Orion, the eldest son, had fallen against a nearby table, his body convulsing violently before going still. Then Leora, then Zephyr. Panic took hold of the guests as more people noticed the horrifying scene. The Aldridge family, once the heart of the celebration, now lay lifeless before them. Their once cheerful faces were frozen in expressions of pain and confusion. The music continued to play, eerily out of place against the unfolding tragedy. People scrambled to call for help. Some ran for the doors, pushing past each other in fear. Others stood frozen, unable to comprehend how an entire family could have collapsed within moments of each other. Someone attempted CPR, but it was useless. The Aldridges were gone. Within minutes, Sirens wailed in the distance, their sharp cries cutting through the chaos. Police cars and ambulances arrived, their flashing lights painting the mansion in alternating shades of red and blue. Officers forced their way through the frightened crowd, securing the scene and trying to gather information. The guests, once celebratory and carefree, now stood in shock, their elegant attire and champagne glasses starkly contrasting with the horror surrounding them. The new year had arrived, but for the Aldridge family, time had stopped forever. The investigation into the Aldridge family's sudden and mysterious deaths began immediately. Police cordoned off the estate, questioning every guest who had attended the party. Some were still in shock, unable to process what they had witnessed, while others recounted the night's events with trembling voices. The sheer number of attendees made it difficult to determine who had been close to the family in their final moments. The security team, catering staff, and household employees were all questioned, but no one could provide a clear answer as to how the tragedy had occurred. The most chilling detail was that there had been no obvious cause of death. The Aldridges had not been shot, stabbed, or physically harmed in any way. No one had seen an attacker, no gunshots had rung out, and there was no sign of struggle. Yet 5 people had collapsed within seconds of each other. First responders checked for traces of carbon monoxide or airborne toxins, but the initial readings came back normal. The entire scene felt surreal, as though the deaths had been an act of fate rather than a planned attack. Detectives turned their attention to the guest list, reviewing invitations and cross-referencing them with security footage. Every year, the Aldridges sent out elegant, personalized invitations to their closest friends, business partners, and extended family. This year was no exception, but as investigators examined the list, they discovered something strange. A handful of attendees claimed they had not been personally invited by Patton or Serafina. Instead, they had received an anonymous invitation just days before the party. The card was nearly identical to the official ones, except for one cryptic message at the bottom: "Welcome the new year with those who matter most." The presence of these unexpected guests raised questions. Who had sent the additional invitations? Why had they altered the message? And, more importantly, had the killer been among them? Investigators obtained security footage from the estate's many cameras, searching for anything out of the ordinary. At first, everything appeared normal. Guests, arriving in elegant attire, laughing as they stepped inside, exchanging warm greetings. Nothing seemed unusual, but as they reviewed the footage from later in the night, they discovered a crucial gap. At precisely 11:45 p.m., the cameras glitched, going completely dark for 3 full minutes. When the footage resumed, the party continued as usual, but something was different. A new figure had appeared in the backyard, barely visible in the dim lighting. Dressed in black, with their face obscured by a hood, the person moved toward the back entrance of the house. No one seemed to notice. A further review of the footage inside the house revealed something even more unsettling. In the moments leading up to the countdown, a shadowy figure could be seen weaving through the crowd. They did not engage with any guests, nor did they appear to be enjoying the festivities. They simply moved with quiet purpose, staying just out of focus. The killer had been inside the house, blending in among the celebration, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Forensics teams combed through the scene, testing food, drinks, and surfaces for potential toxins. When the results came back, the answer became clear. The Aldridge family had been poisoned. Traces of a rare, nearly undetectable substance were found in their champagne glasses. It was fast-acting, shutting down the nervous system within seconds, leaving no time for the victims to cry out for help. Whoever had planned this had done so meticulously, ensuring the poison targeted only the Aldridges while the rest of the guests remained unharmed. Attention turned to the catering staff, as they had been responsible for serving the drinks throughout the night. Each worker was questioned, their movements scrutinized. Most of them had been hired through a well-known event service, their backgrounds checked and verified, but something didn't add up. When investigators reviewed the staff roster, They found that an extra waiter had been working that night, someone who had never been hired by the company. No one could recall when this mystery waiter had arrived or when they had left. There was no record of them signing in, and no one remembered seeing their face clearly. It was as if they had slipped in unnoticed, completed their task, and vanished without a trace. Whoever they were, they had walked into the party with the intent to kill. With a poisoning confirmed, the investigation took on a new urgency. This had not been a random act of violence or a robbery gone wrong. It had been a carefully planned execution, carried out with precision. The question that haunted detectives now was not just how it had been done, but why. The investigation into the Aldridge family's deaths took a darker turn as detectives began to dig into their personal lives. On the surface, the family appeared perfect, wealthy, influential, and admired in their community. Patton Aldridge was a successful businessman with a long list of accomplishments, while Serafina was known for her philanthropic efforts and high society connections. Their children, Orion, Leora, and Zephyr, had grown up in luxury, enjoying privileges that most could only dream of. But as investigators peeled back the layers of their lives, they uncovered a web of secrets that suggested the Aldridges were not as untouchable as they seemed. Patton Aldridge had made a fortune through real estate and investments, but not all of his dealings were clean. Records showed that he had been involved in several business disputes, some of which had turned ugly. He had acquired properties through aggressive tactics, forcing struggling homeowners out of their residences and flipping the properties for massive profits. Lawsuits had been filed against him, but with his wealth and influence, he had always managed to evade any serious consequences. Investigators found a long list of former business partners, competitors, and disgruntled clients, any of whom could have held a grudge strong enough to warrant revenge. Serafina's reputation was pristine, but financial records painted a different picture. Just days before the party, she had withdrawn a significant amount of money from a private account. The transaction had been flagged due to its unusual nature, but no one knew what the money had been used for. There were no large purchases, no sudden investments, and no known debts that needed to be paid off. It was as if she had taken the money out for something secretive, something she had not wanted anyone to trace. Some speculated that she had been paying someone off, while others believed she had been trying to escape something much more dangerous. Their eldest son, Orion, had also been hiding something. A recent expulsion from his university had been covered up by the family, keeping his reputation intact. The official report claimed it was due to academic dishonesty, but an anonymous source suggested otherwise. There were whispers of a violent altercation, one that had resulted in serious injuries. The university had chosen to handle the matter quietly, allowing Orion to withdraw rather than pressing charges. His social media activity in the months leading up to his death had been erratic, cryptic posts about trust, betrayal, and a growing sense of paranoia. Whatever had happened to him, it was clear that he had felt threatened. Leora and Zephyr, the younger children, had fewer visible secrets, but investigators found strange details in their phone records. Leora had been communicating with an unknown number in the weeks leading up to the party, exchanging dozens of messages late at night. The number was traced to a burner phone, making it impossible to identify the sender. Zephyr, the youngest, had confided in a close friend that something felt off in the house, though he had never elaborated on what he meant. With so many unanswered questions, detectives considered the possibility that the Aldridges had been targeted not just because of their wealth, but because of something they had done. The poisoning had been calculated, executed with precision, and left behind no direct evidence. The presence of the mystery waiter, the glitch in the security footage, and the anonymous invitations all pointed to a killer who had planned this for a long time. A breakthrough came when investigators discovered that the poison used in the murders was not easily accessible. It was a rare compound, known to be used in scientific research and highly regulated due to its potency. There were only a handful of places in the country where it could be obtained legally. This led them to a pharmaceutical company that had reported a small but suspicious theft of the substance just months earlier. The suspect in that case had never been caught, but there was a name attached to the internal investigation: Cassian Vexley. The name meant nothing at first, but as detectives combed through old case files, a chilling connection emerged. 5 years earlier, the Aldridge family had been indirectly involved in a fatal hit-and-run accident. The victim was Cambria Vexley, a young woman who had been left in a coma after being struck by an unidentified vehicle. She had died months later, and her husband, Cassian Vexley, had been vocal about his suspicions that the responsible party had never been brought to justice. Records showed that the case had been quietly settled, with no charges ever filed. Cassian Vexley had vanished from the public eye after his wife's death. His last known whereabouts were in a different state, where he had been working as a chemist. The discovery of his name in connection with the stolen poison was too much to be a coincidence. Investigators now had a new theory. This had not been a random crime, but a meticulously crafted act of revenge. With Cassian Vexley's name now tied to the stolen poison, investigators delved deeper into his background, searching for any trace of his whereabouts in the years following his wife's death. His digital footprint was nearly non-existent. No active social media, no bank transactions, and no known employment records after leaving his position at the pharmaceutical company. It was as if he had disappeared. But the more they searched, the more they realized that his disappearance had been deliberate. Investigators pulled up surveillance footage from airports, train stations, and rental car agencies around the time of the reported theft. A blurry image from a gas station security camera in a neighboring state showed a man who bore a striking resemblance to Cassian. He was wearing a hooded jacket, his head tilted downward, making it difficult to see his face. He purchased a few small items: bottled water, a lighter, and a prepaid phone. The timestamp placed him in the area around the same time as the poison theft. It wasn't enough to confirm his involvement, but it was the first real lead in weeks. Determined to find a connection between Cassian and the Aldridges, investigators revisited the hit-and-run case involving his wife, Cambria. The records revealed that Patton Aldridge had been in the area on the night of the accident, attending a corporate event just a few miles from where Cambria had been struck. His vehicle at the time, a luxury SUV, had been registered for repairs just days after the incident, citing minor body damage, though no evidence had ever directly linked him to the crime. There were inconsistencies in his statements. The case had been closed quickly, dismissed as an unsolved accident, but the more investigators looked into it, the more it seemed like the Aldridge family had used their influence to suppress the truth. A deeper review of Cassian Vexley's past painted a picture of a man consumed by grief and rage. After his wife's death, he had become obsessed with finding out who was responsible. Friends and former colleagues recalled that he had changed drastically. His once calm and logical demeanor had been replaced by paranoia and bitterness. He had spoken often about corruption, power, and injustice, hinting that those responsible for his wife's death had paid their way out of consequences. Then, suddenly, he had vanished. Investigators now believed that Cassian had spent years planning, his revenge waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The New Year's Eve party had been the ideal setting. Hundreds of guests, chaotic energy, and plenty of distractions. The poison had been administered so subtly that no one had noticed until it was too late. The mysterious invitations, the extra catering staff, and the 3-minute security glitch all pointed to meticulous planning. A search of financial records revealed another chilling detail. Months before the Aldridge murders, an anonymous rental transaction had been made for a small storage unit just outside the city. The rental had been paid in cash for an entire year in advance, leaving no digital trail. When authorities arrived at the storage facility, they found it nearly empty except for a few crucial items: a catering uniform identical to the ones worn at the Aldridge party, a collection of newspaper clippings about the hit-and-run case, and a vial containing trace amounts of the same poison used in the murders. The most damning evidence was a single sheet of paper left on the storage unit floor. It was an invitation to the Aldridge New Year's Eve party, identical to the ones sent to guests. But this one was different. Instead of the usual elegant lettering and celebratory message, 4 words had been written across it in black ink. Justice is finally served. Cassian Vexley had been in the Aldridge home that night. He had slipped in undetected, carried out his plan, and disappeared before anyone could notice. But despite the overwhelming evidence pointing to him, he remained nowhere to be found. Man who had spent years waiting for his revenge had seemingly vanished into the shadows, leaving behind nothing but the echoes of a crime perfectly executed. The hunt for Cassian Vexley became an urgent priority. With every piece of evidence pointing to his involvement, authorities across multiple states were put on high alert. Yet, despite the overwhelming proof of his guilt, he remained elusive. No credit card activity, no known associates, no recent purchases. He had planned his disappearance just as carefully as he had orchestrated the Aldridge family's demise. Investigators pieced together his movements leading up to the crime, uncovering a pattern of calculated steps. Over the past year, he had rented multiple short-term properties under different aliases, each location abandoned after just a few weeks. Surveillance footage from various locations showed a man fitting his description, but he was always careful, wearing hats, adjusting camera angles, avoiding any identifying marks. It became clear that he had spent years preparing for this moment, ensuring that he would never be caught. As authorities scoured the country for any sign of him, another disturbing revelation surfaced. Forensics had re-examined the Aldridge estate, focusing on the security system and the mysterious 3-minute blackout. The cause of the glitch was finally uncovered. A small, sophisticated device had been attached to the wiring of the main surveillance hub. It had been programmed to disable all cameras at precisely 11:45 p.m., then erase itself from the system afterward. The device was traced to an underground market known for selling to those who specialized in sabotage and espionage. Whoever had provided it to Cassian was still unknown, but it proved one thing: he had not worked alone. Attention shifted to potential accomplices. While Cassian had executed the crime, someone had helped him gain access to the party undetected. Investigators revisited the catering company, re-interviewing staff to determine whether any of them had knowingly or unknowingly assisted him. One name stood out: Elias Warwick, a temporary employee who had been hired for the event, but had not shown up for his scheduled shift. When authorities tracked down his address, they found the apartment abandoned, his belongings hastily packed. Whoop! It was clear that Elias had vanished at the same time as Cassian. Further investigation into Elias revealed that he had once worked with Cassian at the pharmaceutical company, specializing in chemical compounds. The connection was undeniable. Elias had likely been the one to procure the poison, while Cassian had devised the plan. Together, they had ensured that the Aldridge family would never see another new year. As weeks passed with no sign of either, theories swirled about their fate. Some believed that Cassian had meticulously planned his escape, leaving the country under yet another false identity. Others speculated that he had taken his own life, knowing that justice had been served. In his eyes, a more chilling theory suggested that Elias had betrayed him, eliminating Cassian to protect himself from exposure. The case remained open, but leads grew cold. Without Cassian or Elias in custody, the full truth of the Aldridge massacre remained elusive. The once powerful family had been wiped from existence, their secrets buried along with them. The elite circles they had once ruled were left shaken, knowing that money and influence had not been enough to save them. A year after the murders, a single envelope was delivered to the lead detective working the case. No return address, no fingerprints, no digital traces. Inside was a single photograph, an image of Cassian Vexley standing on a quiet beach at sunset, staring out at the ocean. On the back of the photo, 4 words had been written in the same black ink as the note found in the storage unit: "Justice is never over." The message was clear: Cassian Vexley was still out there, and wherever he wasn't finished yet.